Until now, very few people know the full truth about the hidden UCR late fee forgiveness window that could save new authorities thousands of dollars in penalties. You've heard about unified carrier registration, but nobody told you there's a secret grace period where you can file late without facing the full wrath of enforcement. I have seen new owners panic and overpay when they could have simply used this window to get back on track without extra fees. The FMCSA and states don't advertise this forgiveness period because they want you to file on time, but exists in 90% of new authorities have no idea it's there. Most carriers think missing the December 31st deadline means automatic fines, but that is simply not the full truth. Let me reveal exactly what this forgiveness window is and how you can use it to save your business from unnecessary penalties. But the real problem starts here when you realize that most agents and filing services never mention the UCR late fee forgiveness window to their clients. They want you to file early so they can collect their fees and move on to the next customer without explaining your options. The curious part is that many carriers who miss the deadline simply panic and pay penalties they could have avoided entirely. The UCR system has a practical reality that most people overlook. Filing late doesn't trigger separate filing side penalties the way other programs do. The registration window opens on October 1st each year, and carriers have until December 31st to file for the upcoming year. But what happens if you miss that date? That's where the hidden forgiveness window comes into play, and most carriers never discover it until it's too late. Let me show you exactly how this window works and why it could save your authority. There's a hidden part of the UCR system that most new trucking owners miss completely. A 2-month grace period where prior year credentials are still honored. Most jurisdictions require renewal by December 31st for following year, but there's a 2-month grace period in January and February where current or prior credentials are honored if your account is in good standing. The mystery is that enforcement officers won't tell you about this window at a roadside stop. They will simply ask if you are registered. If you are within this grace period and your account is in good standing, you are technically compliant even without the new year's filing completed. Most state enforcement begins citing carriers on January 1st if their UCR isn't on the system, but this grace period protects carriers who are actively renewing. I am going to reveal exactly how this 2-month window works and how to use it to your advantage. The strange thing is that the UCR late fee forgiveness window doesn't work the way most carriers think it does, and that confusion costs them money. You might assume that missing the December 31st deadline means you immediately owe late fees, penalties, and possibly even lose your operating authority. But the unexpected truth is that UCR doesn't have a compounding monthly penalty clock like some other trucking programs. The costs don't quietly pile up while you are not looking. They show up only at enforcement points if they happen. This means if you file during the January-February grace period, you are effectively avoiding the worst consequences. The strangest part is that filing late for UCR doesn't even trigger separate filing side penalties the way IFDA does. Most operators handle the back payment plus current year filing in a single sitting once they sit down to do it. 90% of new authorities have no idea that the UCR late fee forgiveness window exists, and they end up paying penalties they could have easily avoided. The shocking part is that most carriers who miss the December 31st deadline simply assume they are in trouble and pay unnecessary fees. I have seen carriers pay hundreds of dollars in penalties when they could have filed during the grace period without any extra charges. The UCR plan doesn't advertise this window because their goal is to get carriers to file on time, but the window is real and accessible to everyone. New authorities are especially vulnerable because they're already overwhelmed with applications, insurance, and compliance requirements. Most agents never mention this window because they assume you know about it or they just want you to file early. Do not be one of the 90% who misses this opportunity to save money and stay compliant. There is a hidden step that agents never clearly explain about the 2-month grace period that can save your authority from penalties and out-of-service orders. Most jurisdictions require renewal by December 31st of following year, but there's a 2-month grace period in January and February where current or prior year credentials are honored if your account is in good standing. The secret is that during this window, you can still file your UCR renewal without facing the full brunt of enforcement actions. If you miss the December 31st deadline, you are not automatically out of compliance. You have until the end of February to get your filing in order. Many states enforce UCR registration starting January 1st, but if you file during the grace period, you avoid the most severe penalties. I will show you exactly how to use this 2-month window to protect your authority and your wallet. If you miss the UCR late fee forgiveness window, your authority can face fines, out-of-service orders, and even permanent marks on your CSA profile. The UCR program is a federally mandated annual fee that motor carriers, brokers, and freight forwarders must pay to their state of base jurisdiction. If you fail to register on time, you risk fines, out-of-service orders, and even losing your operating authority. State police actively check UCR status at roadside stops and way stations, and fines can run from $100 to $2,000 per vehicle per day, depending on the state. Trucks can be detained on the spot, and the violation lands a permanent mark on your CSA profile. The worst part is that this entire nightmare could have been avoided if you had simply used the 2-month grace period to file your renewal. Do not let a missed deadline cost you thousands of dollars and damage your safety record. Every single day you delay filing your UCR renewal is a day you risk roadside citation, fines, and out-of-service orders that could shut down your operation. The UCR registration period typically opens in the fall, and carriers must complete their registration by December 31st each year for the upcoming calendar year. Once January 1st arrives, enforcement begins in participating states, and carriers without valid UCR may face citations, fines, and enforcement actions. In practice, many states' enforcement partners use January 1st as a go/no-go date. If roadside officers don't see a current UCR on file, you can expect penalties, additional scrutiny, or even being placed out of service. The sooner you file during the grace period, the sooner you close the exposure and protect your operation from enforcement actions. Do not wait until you get a citation to realize you should have filed earlier. Those who use the UCR late fee forgiveness window save hundreds of dollars in penalties and keep their authority active, while those who don't face fines and out-of-service orders. The difference between these two groups is not luck. It is simply knowing that the 2-month grace period exists and using it to your advantage. Before learning about this window, you are vulnerable to panic, unnecessary fees, and enforcement actions that could have been avoided. After learning about this window, you have control over your compliance timeline and can file without fear of immediate penalties. You can either be the owner who files during the grace period without penalties or the one who gets pulled over and cited for an expired UCR. The choice is yours, and it starts with understanding that the UCR forgiveness window is real and available to you. And the most important tip to avoid UCR penalties and use the forgiveness window effectively comes at the very end of this video. Most people skip ahead or click away before they learn the one thing that determines whether they can use the grace period or face enforcement. I have saved this for last because it is a thing that catches almost every new owner by surprise. You would never guess that such a simple detail could determine whether you qualify for forgiveness window, but happens every single day. This final piece of information is what separates the owners who file during the grace period without penalties from those who face fines and out-of-service orders. Stay with me until the end, so you do not miss the most important tip of all. The UCR late fee forgiveness window is a 2-month grace period in January and February that allows carriers to file their renewal without immediate penalties. Most jurisdictions require renewal by December 31st of the following year, but there's a 2-month grace period in January and February where current or prior year credentials are honored if your account is in good standing. During this window, you can still file your UCR renewal without facing the full enforcement actions that begin on January 1st. This does not mean there are no consequences at all, but it means you can file late without the severe penalties that come with prolonged non-compliance. The grace period is designed to give carriers a reasonable opportunity to complete their renewal even if they miss the December 31st deadline. Understanding this window is the first step to avoiding unnecessary stress and penalties. When you file UCR late during forgiveness window, you are not automatically hit with penalties, but you must still complete your filing as soon as possible. The practical reality is that UCR doesn't compound monthly penalties like some other trucking programs. Filing late doesn't trigger separate filing side penalties the way IFTA does. Most operators handle the back payment plus current year filing in a single sitting once they sit down to do it. However, If you operate interstate without current year UCR, you can draw a citation from the inspecting state, with penalties typically ranging from $100 to $1,500 for a first offense. Filing UCR afterward closes the exposure going forward, and the citation itself doesn't compound once the registration is active. The key is to file as early as possible during the grace period to minimize your risk exposure. If you miss the UCR late fee forgiveness window, you face increased enforcement scrutiny, higher fines, and potential out-of-service orders. Once the grace period ends in February, state enforcement becomes more aggressive, and carriers without valid UCR may face citation fines and enforcement actions. Fines can range from $100 to $2,000 per vehicle per day, depending on the state. Some states will hold a truck on the spot if UCR is found missing during an inspection. The hold lifts as soon as UCR is paid for the current year, but the citation itself remains on your record. If you wait too long, you risk not just fines, but also out-of-service orders that can shut down your operation entirely. Missing forgiveness window turns a minor compliance issue into a major headache. Before you rely on the UCR late fee forgiveness window, there's one critical step you must take to ensure you qualify for it. You must verify that your account is in good standing and that you have no outstanding compliance issues from previous years. If you have unpaid UCR fees from prior years, you need to file each missed year to the National Registration System to clear your record. Filing late for closed years is still the correct way to settle the record, and the back filings are straightforward. One filing per year, one fee per year, with no compounding penalty schedule. Once your account is in good standing, you can use the 2-month grace period to file your current year's renewal without facing immediate enforcement. Taking these steps before the grace period ends ensures you qualify for the forgiveness window and avoid unnecessary penalties. Remember the question I started with about the hidden UCR late fee forgiveness window that 90% of new authorities don't know exists? The truth is now in your hands. There's a 2-month grace period in January and February where you can file your UCR renewal without immediate penalties. The deadline is December 31st, but a forgiveness window gives you until the end of February to get your filing in order. Most trucking owners will never learn about this window, and they will face fines, out-of-service orders, and permanent marks on their CSA profile. But you are not most owners anymore. You now have the knowledge to use this window to your advantage. Go file your UCR renewal during the grace period. Verify your account is in good standing and protect your authority from unnecessary penalties. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional legal or filing advice. I am not the FMCSA, not a government agency, and not a licensed filing agent or attorney in any capacity. The information provided here is based on public FMCSA resources, independent research, and personal experience with trucking compliance over many years. Every operation is unique, and your specific situation may require different steps than what is covered in this video today. Always visit the official UCR website at ucr.gov for the most accurate and up-to-date requirements before submitting your registration. The responsibility for your compliance is yours alone. Use this as a guide and verify everything yourself before relying on any filing window. Good luck with your UCR compliance and your trucking authority journey.